And,
Yeah.
it's hot down here. It's hotter than hell.
Yeah. And so we're live. And so we're now going to give everybody a really hot reading. My name is Alexis Kienlen. I'm a fiction writer. My new book, Mad Cow, just came out. I'm also a journalist and a poet. And I'm very pleased to introduce Bob Stallworthy. I first met Bob when Frontenac published my first book, and Bob was working for Frontenac, and he was the first person who ever asked me to sign a book. And it was a momentous occasion for me, and he's helped me a lot along the way. I'm going to read his biography, and then I'd like to do a land acknowledgement and some thank yous, and then Bob is going to read for about 16 minutes. And then I'll come back and we will do a Q&A. I have some questions for Bob, and I'm sure you do have some questions too. And you can type them in the chat on the YouTube. But right away, I'll get started with our program. So Bob Stallworthy has been active in the Alberta writing community since he began writing full-time and professionally in 1985. He is a member of the Writers Union of Canada and the Writers Guild of Alberta. Bob has 4 books of poetry previously published. His poetry has been shortlisted for the City of Calgary W.O. Mitchell Book Prize twice and the Stephan G. Stephansson Prize for Poetry once. Bob has numerous accolades. He's a lifetime member of the Writers Guild of Alberta and the recipient of the Golden Pen Award for Lifetime Achievement from the Writers Guild of Alberta in 2019. He has been a patient family advisor with the Kidney Health Strategic Clinical Network, Alberta Health Services, since 2016. He is full-time caregiver for his wife, who suffered traumatic kidney failure in 2013. So that's a bit about Bob, and now I'd like to tell you a little bit about the land that we are on. I'm on Treaty 6, but Bob is on Treaty 7, so I'll read the Treaty 7 acknowledgement. Bob is on the land, the Treaty 7 territory, the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Nations, including Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda First Nations. We also acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked this land for centuries. I'd also like to thank the Writers Guild of Alberta for these events. As an author who also has a book coming out at this time, I know that these kind of events are really help you connect to the community and are really good for letting us enjoy newly released books and new literature. And I'd also like to thank the Rosé Foundation for their gracious sponsorship of this series. With that, I'm going to mute myself, and Bob will take us away with his reading.
Thank you, Alexis. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Thank you to everybody who has been able to give me some of your time this evening and join us. And I'd also like to thank the Writers Guild of Alberta for organizing the reading series that and making me a part of it. It is, as Alex says, a good way of a writer getting the information on a new book or a new to most people book out there. So I thank the Writers Guild as well. Alexis and I sort of talked about how this would go tonight, and we both decided that perhaps one of the things to do to start the reading off would be for me to read the preface in the book. It's the first time I've ever put a preface in a book of poetry, but I think if I do, it will give you, the audience, a bit of an idea as to where and why these poems came about as they did. So what I'll do is to start out by reading the preface, and then I have about 7 poems which I will read with a little bit of yik-yak in between. And then I think by that time, Alexis will be ready to come back and join us. On November 19th, 2013, Marilyn Stallworthy collapsed in the parking lot of a Calgary shopping center, her lungs invaded by fragments of blood clots that had migrated from her leg. She would have died there, but a physician and his wife were also in the parking lot and saw her go down. An EMS team was only 5 minutes away, and in spite of Marilyn's heart stopping 4 times in the parking lot, the EMS team kept her alive and got her to the emergency room at the Foothills Medical Center. I was at Mount Royal University taking a literary event for which I had silenced my phone. Marilyn had dropped me off there and promised to pick me up an hour and a half later. She was late. When I opened my phone to call her, I saw that I had several calls, and then the phone rang in my hand. Time was running out. Marilyn stayed in hospital for 254 days. She almost died several times there, particularly in those first hours. Her future would be confinement to a bed, ventilation, dialysis, and resolve. For me, it was fear, patience, loneliness, and hope. On July 31st, 2014, Marilyn came home. She was predicted to need a wheelchair most of the time and dialysis 3 days a week for the rest of her life. She walked out of that hospital's front door using her wheelchair as a walker. She still uses a walker or a cane, and for the past 5 years, she hasn't required dialysis. Now that's changed in the last year, and she now does dialysis every night while she's asleep, and she does it at home. The survival rate for what Marilyn has been through is about 2%. So that will give you a little bit of the background behind which these poems were written. And before I go any further, one of the things I would like to do also is to thank Richard Harrison for not only being a friend and a mentor, but for the excellent skills that he brought to bear as an editor on this book, and may help me make these poems the best that they could be. And I guess I should also at the same time thank Frontenac House for publishing the book. Marilyn, as the preface said, the EMS got her to the Foothills Medical Center, and they got her into the ER, and I did catch up with her there, and eventually we wound up going up to the ICU unit, and I had to spend an hour or more waiting while the nurses got Marilyn settled in the ICU before I could get in to see her. But this first poem starts with being in the ICU. The question the doctor asked me in ICU: if he doesn't give you the clot-busting drugs, you die for sure. If he does, you might bleed to death. You lie unconscious beside us, and because I am here, so is the question: what should he do? The answer is simple: just fix this. Then the answer he can use, the only one I could give, but not the only one that could have been. 254 nights later, when we get home from the hospital, I tell you, I'm glad you're back. You say, so am I. Then thank you, as if you heard. Marilyn obviously was in hospital over Christmas. And Christmas is one of the biggest times of the year as far as I'm concerned. I'm still the biggest kid on the block when it comes to Christmas. And I can thank my mother for that. But I can also thank my wife when she discovered how much Christmas meant to me after we got married. She put a lot of time and effort into making Christmas important in our house. Christmas. The hospital phones, 2 a.m., tells me I need to be there. The doctor on call tells me they are doing everything they know how to do. I show them I still have tears I haven't used. Tell the doctor, you are all I have left. One of the things that happened every couple of days while Marilyn was in the hospital was that she would go down, be taken down to the dialysis unit. And every time they took her down there, her blood pressure would crash. And it didn't take very long before the dialysis unit was pushing hard to move Marilyn back to the ICU unit when her blood pressure crashed. And us within sight of the harbor. They repeat over the intercom, code 66, dialysis unit, second floor, code 66. Someone's having trouble breathing, dialysis unit, second floor. That's where you are. They want to send you back to the ventilator in ICU. You've already said you won't go. I have, for most of my life, thought of myself as being a-religious. However, for also most of my life, I have worn a little silver cross around my neck. And one day when I was talking to Richard about poems to put in the book, he asked me about the cross and he said, "Why do you wear it?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I just do. I don't know why I wear it." And he thought about that for a minute and he said, "Yeah, you do. And I want you to go away and write about it." And I wasn't sure what I was going to try to say. And then this poem and several others finally emerged. The Beggar. So long I've told myself I don't believe. Don't pray. Don't ask. Don't even pretend. I'm the same as all the others who don't believe until there is no one else. I'm begging out loud. To whom? My neighbors? Their homes turned dark hours ago. They cannot hear. Their doors are locked. The rooms in our house, foreign places, full of shadows of things no longer known. I turn on every light in the house, as if doing so I will find you, not your absence standing there. For tonight, if there is someone to listen, someone who cares, and God knows I need someone to care, I will beg. I will believe. It took about 2 months, 2.5 months maybe, So somewhere into late January, early February of 2014, before we knew that Marilyn was actually going to survive. And even when we did know that, we didn't know quite what it was going to look like. And even though those things were positive, and I was feeling much more positive about the situation, I also found myself getting angry at times, especially when I was by myself. Impact statement. At night, between lights off and dreams, I could tell you I wanted back the way it was. When you had calendar squares filled, words, numbers, arrows, reminders to both of us of our past and future. When we would decide in 20 minutes to drive 200 kilometers just for the hell of it. When I was so sure I wouldn't have to fill all of the air in our house, the flatness in our bed by myself. I want it back, all of it. I could tell you how robbed I feel. Thank God you have already fallen asleep. As I said, Marilyn did get home July 31st, 2014. And she was on dialysis for a little while, but had enough energy that she really wanted to start doing things around the house like she used to do. And one of the things that she didn't used to do was garden. She didn't like being outside and gardening. That was my job. But when she came home from the hospital, one of the things she decided was that she wanted to go outside and do some gardening. Something more that you can do. Today you asked me if you could help. Said you could water the flowers by the front door. You stood holding that hose, watered lily of the valley, the cedar tree, peony, and hosta. Your face, the most beautiful flower breaking into bloom. The last 6 years, I guess it is now, from July of 2014. In fact, it's almost 6 years to the day as of tonight. Have been quite a roller coaster. And not all of the time has been really pleasant, but it has certainly taught both of us a whole bunch of lessons. And in particular, it has taught me a pretty important lesson for my life. This garden. The rose bush I bought the day you came home from the hospital blooms again for the 4th year. Last night, I combed leftover summer from the wildflower bed I made to mark 1 year home. I planted sweet peas, hoping they would climb their stories into colors we use to celebrate. This garden teaches me relearn to love. Thank you. I guess I'm looking for Alexis to come back and join us again.
I'm back, and thank you for your beautiful reading, Bob. Before I get into some of the questions I had, I realized that there was one question that I wanted to ask based on your reading. I'm just wondering how long you and Marilyn have been together.
We will have been married 44 years as of the 7th of August.
Oh, wow. Happy early anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit on the phone, you and I did a pre-chat. And so what I think it would be interesting for the audience to know, and I'd like to hear more about, is the process of writing this book and the role of your writing group in writing this book.
Okay, well, I think that's an important thing to sort of know as well, because there was a point in the whole thing with Marilyn. I think it was probably Christmas Eve morning. Christmas Eve morning, I got called back to the hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning, and things were not good. And I remember walking down the corridor all by myself, lots of green light around. And I got to a corner, and as I turned the corner, I said out loud, "I don't give a shit if I never write another word." And I tell that story because as we got to know Marilyn was going to get better and would eventually be coming home, she started to push me back towards the writing group, which I had not attended. And when I went back, Richard and the rest of the group, of course, but Richard welcomed me back with saying, "I'm glad you're back. I wanted you here. I don't mind if you don't write anything, just be here."
Mm-hmm.
And for the first couple of weeks, I don't know, I've lost track of how many, um, I didn't write anything. I just listened. And eventually I started, the group always starts with a 5 to 10 minute free write. And I put the pen on the page, and things started to happen. Words started to show up. And I got brave enough to read some of them to the group. And Richard's reaction was, "That's getting close to a poem. And he said, don't throw it away. Don't lose it." So after I had been doing that for several months, the writing journal was beginning to fill up with these "don't throw them away" things.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to start to think about what to do with them now that I had them. And then we started to really talk about whether or not this was going to turn into a book, which is, as you know, it's not the same thing as just writing a bunch of poems.
No, it's really not. It's just sometimes then you just start being able to see the book and you're like, oh, I guess this is a book now.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So when you and I were, just one second. So we have one comment from someone who thanked you for the lovely reading. They really enjoyed the reading. Anyone else, if you want to write a comment or ask a question in the chat, please feel free. So Bob, when you and I talked about this on the phone, you were telling me that this book for you, and I agreed with you and saw it instantly, is a book of love poems and a book about transitions. And I'm just wondering if you can elaborate some more on that.
Okay, I think both of those things, I agree. I know we talked about them. And I do believe that the book is both a book of love poems and a book of transitions. But I didn't set out to write either. I set out to just write a bunch of poems. And it wasn't until I had finished the book that I went back through them with Richard on several occasions, of course, but also on my own, and suddenly thought, I know the word love only shows up once in the book, but I think part of the reason that I wrote the poems that I did was because of love.
Mm-hmm.
And as I told you on the phone, I would love to torment a grade 12 class, high school class, with the comment that the book is a book of love poems, and watch them argue with me because the only time love shows up in the book is in that last poem. But that started to give me the idea that, yeah, all of these poems are coming from some place which is not just observation of what happened.
Well, just like reading the book on the first time, and then of course it's always different when you get to hear a poet read their own work, especially something as so personal as this book with the added stories in it. The tenderness and the fear in the poems is very apparent to me, and that really comes across as and makes it more of a book about love.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always thought that I was, well, not hard or tough, but that I could cope with a lot of things until this happened with Marilyn. And I've
Mm-hmm.
never been so absolutely terrified in all my life.
Yeah.
Nor did I know totally what it was I was terrified of. I
Mm-hmm.
was just terrified. I was scared, witless. And there were times when, you know, somebody would just look at me sideways and I would burst into tears. And there were other times when that didn't happen, of course. But I just didn't know how I was going to survive if she didn't.
Yeah.
And the transition thing came from a request. I belong to a provincial committee through Alberta Health on kidney health.
Mm-hmm.
And the manager of the committee had said to me that at one point he was familiar with some of the poems, and he said, "We want you to do a presentation at one of our committee meetings on transitions in your experience from healthcare." And he said they can be big transitions or small ones, whatever. And I looked at the book and I suddenly thought, yeah, sure, there are transitions of, from life the way I knew it to suddenly having to face this whole crisis in the hospital. There were transitions from ER to ICU, and from ICU to a medical unit, all of those kinds of things, which I looked at and saw as being big transitions. But then there were also the small ones, some of which are in the poems in the book. Transitions within me, transitions within Meryl, transitions within our relationship. Because the relationship is not the same one we had on November the 18th,
Mm-hmm.
2013. Not by a long shot.
So, one thing I was reminded of, or kind of felt as I read the book, is the brevity of the poems. And so I'm just wondering if if you can comment on that, because what it kind of reminded me a bit of was William Carlos Williams, just like and this is kind of the stuff I dig, like the plain language, so like, the shortness. These are all things that I really like. So I just wonder if you could comment on that kind of the style of the poems.
Well, I'm flattered that you are reminded of William Carlos Williams with some of the things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the shortness and a lot of the shortest poems came out of the editing. And Richard, of course, as my editor, had considerable influence on that. But one of the things that he has always asked us when we were looking at poems was, when you get to the end of the poem, is there anything left to say? Is there a question left unanswered? Is your reader wandering off into the ether to make up the grocery list, or have you suddenly left them completely behind somehow? And if the answer to all of those questions is no, then why are you saying anything more? You've said it. Let the poem say it. And
Yeah.
so when with that first poem in the book, which is, I didn't read it tonight, but the one lines, I think it's tonight. I follow the lines on the page. Tonight I follow the lines on the page. As I write them, they lead me here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do I need to say anything else?
No, like I actually was just re-looking at the book before we got started talking, and I was just like, when you're looking at it and you know the preface and you know what the book is about, it's just kind of like the poem lines is like, okay, we're starting this journey now.
Yep.
Like this is the journey. We're on it. We're on the train, and so then you're going through on the train through this experience that you and Marilyn had together.
Yep. Yeah.
So
it could be the lines of the actual poem, or it could be the blank lines on a page in the journal. Either one, or both. And in my mind, it was both. It was, there's the blank page with the lines on it, and my pen is resting on the left-hand margin. And as I write, I follow what I'm writing. But where do the lines lead? They lead me into the book.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, like, also just for me too, is like the blankness, the shortness of the poems, the like as if you were writing them near bedside or in short moments when a person is really grieving or anxious about someone else's health. Sometimes they have trouble concentrating for long periods of time. So I think like the brevity of the poems actually led me to that feeling too. Like it kind of summed up that anxious, I don't have time, I can't concentrate feeling. So yeah. I'm going to read a couple, we do have a couple comments that come in. So Peter Midgley says, lovely reading. Thanks, Bob.
Hi, Peter.
And Betty Jane Haggerett said in, Bob, no matter how many times I read these poems and hear your reading is like encountering them anew, and they will never cease to move me deeply.
Thank you, Betty.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So you were saying a little bit about the Kidney Network asked you to do a presentation. So I'm wondering if you've brought this book to the Kidney Network, or if they know about it, if there's some kind of tie-in between what you're doing with them and your poetry work.
They know about it, and a number of the people who are sort of the managers of the committee. It's a huge committee. It's a provincial committee, and it covers from Grand Prairie and Cold Lake, Fort Mac, all the way down to Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. And they know about it. The manager of the area, the Calgary area, has become quite a good friend of mine. And he certainly has promoted my stuff within the committee, but so do some of the other directors and some of them were actually at the launch. Where it will go, I don't know. It's totally up to them. If they want to try to make some more out of it for their own needs, great. I'm there with bells on. But if it is fine the way it is, then I'm okay with that too. I don't think that there isn't at the moment, there isn't a connection over and above the connection between the few people that were at the launch and the few people that I've sort of become friends with.
Yeah. And so I wanted to ask you about the title poem. So why did you decide to why did Impact Statement become the title poem?
It was a poem, I guess. It was a poem that didn't have a title when I first wrote it. And I was at a reading with actually two people, Richard Harrison and Richard Stephansson. Richard Stephansson is also a guild member. And we were talking afterwards, And Richard Harrison said to me, I think I have a title for that poem. And he said, impact statement. And I thought about it rather quickly because we were just standing in the hallway. And it suddenly occurred to me that might well be a title for the book. And I had to live with it. I wasn't absolutely convinced. But the more I read the poem and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, that's this whole 8.5 months plus, the original 8.5 months had a huge impact on me. And what I'm talking about in the poems is that impact. And I think that, sometimes Marilyn will say, well, the book is about me. And I have to say, yes, it is. But really, it's about me and my reaction to what happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
You were the one that it happened to. Some of it some of it you don't remember, and I'm not going to tell you unless you ask specifically, and I have done that. But there are things that she doesn't remember, and I'm not about to tell
Yeah.
her until or unless she asks. Um, but the poems in the book, even the last one, talking about the garden, the flower beds, that's she was the reason for the roses being here in the first place. But it's the roses and the sweet peas and all of that that the flower beds in the first place that were my reaction to what had happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once I know there was a couple of people who said, "Oh, but impact statement is such a common phrase now. Everybody's using it." And I said, "Yeah, but that to me is immaterial. I'm using it, and I'm using it for what it means to me."
So one thing I've wondered about Bob, and I'm just curious if you can, as this is your fifth book, right? I think I said,
Fifth,
yeah,
fifth
so
book.
fifth book. So I'm just wondering, like, from writing this book and from writing the other books, how writing and reading poetry help you make sense of the world?
Wow, wow.
I know. We
Um,
didn't talk about this question. I'm springing this on him.
yeah, no fair. Um, it does help me make sense of the world. And I think that that's one of the reasons that you write and I write, and anybody we know that writes does it. It to try to figure out what do I feel and what do I think, and if we're really lucky, what do I do about it?
Mhm.
And I think that I, poetry didn't pick me. I picked poetry, and I also decided I would become a writer rather than having this um, idea that at age 3 I was going to be. I was writing my first novel, and I was going to be a writer for the rest of my life. Um, and I think that when I did that, um, I moved into a feeling that this was this was mine. This was me. This was if I great and if I didn't, too bad. Just one more dead carcass on the road. But I wasn't trying to measure up to what my parents thought I should be or what my friends thought I should be. Most people didn't know what I was doing. Um, and when I said I was a writer, oh, really? And half of them, half of them, they walked away after that. and the other half sort of looked at me like I suddenly sprouted two heads. But anyway, um, it became mine. It became the way I deal with the world all the time, and I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that, like, since you talked about the process of writing this book, do you feel like just looking back at this book kind of help helped you, like, as a record of your experiences, or did it help you understand the deeper implications of what was happening, or
All of those things, I think. Yeah, all of those things. I think, some people think that it should have been a cathartic experience, and to a certain extent it was,
Mhm.
and is. But I also find that with this particular book, when I look at it, I still get some of the anxiety that was there when the things were happening.
Yeah.
And I presume that that will eventually lessen the further we get away from it. But I don't know.
Mhm.
I'll just have to see.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's a
go ahead.
very it's a very open and vulnerable book, so I can understand why you would feel some of the anxiety and stuff, because but I think that what, like, the vulnerability in the book is what makes it beautiful and is what will make readers connect with it.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so when did you exactly, like, did you start the book immediately, or you said you started it when Marilyn was already home? So did you have any journal or anything, or you just started in the writing group, just kind of free writing, and it came from there?
Yeah. Yeah. And it really did grow out of the free writing. Um, when I first went back to the group and started to put anything on the page, I didn't really think that I was going to get a book out of that. In fact, I've said to some people, I'm the most surprised person on the planet that there
Yeah.
is a book, because I really didn't think there would be. I guess I didn't trust myself enough with the emotions,
Hmm.
um, that I would be able to find the words that I wanted. I knew that I wanted to write something that I could read without bursting into tears every time I looked at it.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't know whether I could do that, whether I could read them out loud to anybody. It was a very, very gradual um, metamorphosis, I guess, uh, to the point where the writers group, Richard and I sort of came to the same conclusion that, gee, you've got 15 or 20 of these things. What do you think? Maybe what you're doing is working on a book. But like, and you know this as well as anybody, you got to be really careful about, oh, I'm working on a book, because that puts you in a very different position from,
Yeah. I think it's
uh,
just started happening to me, actually.
okay, yeah, it puts you in a very different position from, oh, I'm writing a bunch of poems, or I'm just writing a poem, or I'm just writing a scene that might go somewhere someday in a novel, but not right now. As soon as
Mhm.
you said that's a book, your mind starts to think in those terms.
Well, for me, I've started describing it to people as a haunting, which
Hmm.
sounds kind of gothic, but it's there, and I think about it, and I think about it, and it's like I need to write about it and get it out. Otherwise, it's just there. And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, this needs to come out now. I guess this is what I'm going to be working on.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Anyway, Bob, I could talk to you all night, but unfortunately,
we've run
our
out of time.
we run out of time. We managed to keep on talking. Um, but I would just want to thank everyone for coming tonight, and I want to thank the Writers Guild of Alberta for letting me host, and it was just a pleasure to get to get to sit with this book and get to talk to Bob about this incredibly moving book. Have to admit that even though I was muted in the chat, I was trying not to tear up a few times. So it's a good thing I was off camera.
Well, thank you very much, Alexis, for hosting this tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to get the chance to talk to you. And again, thank you to the Writers Guild for creating this reading series.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I hope it's lovely where you are, and have a good night.
Thanks to everybody who was here.